The cold wind howled through the empty streets of New York as Ethan Walker pulled his tattered coat tighter around his frail body. The cardboard sign next to him read, "Hungry. Lost everything. Anything helps." But that night, like many others before it, people walked past without a second glance. Ethan hadn't always been homeless. Once, he had a modest life, an apartment, a job, dreams. But a series of unfortunate events had stolen it all. His company downsized, medical bills piled up, and with no family to turn to, he found himself on the streets. The city, once full of opportunities, had become a cold and unforgiving place. Tonight, Ethan sat outside a small diner, watching as well-dressed men and women laughed over warm meals. His stomach growled, but he had only one coin left, a single, worn-out quarter. He turned it over in his fingers, wondering if it was worth saving. At that moment, a man in a sleek black suit rushed past him. He looked anxious, his expensive shoes clicking sharply against the pavement. The man was James Carter, a billionaire entrepreneur whose face often appeared in magazines. James had everything: money, power, success. But in that moment, he felt utterly lost. His company was on the brink of collapse, and despite his wealth, he felt an emptiness gnawing at him. Tonight, he had walked out of a high-stakes business meeting, overwhelmed and questioning everything he had worked for. As James hurried down the street, deep in thought, he paused near Ethan. His hands fumbled through his pockets, searching for loose change. But for the first time in years, he had none, just crisp bills and credit cards. He sighed and shook his head. Seeing this, Ethan did something that stunned even himself. He stretched out his trembling hand and offered his last quarter. "Here," Ethan said softly. "Looks like you need this more than I do." James froze, staring at the coin. He was a man used to extravagant deals, billion-dollar contracts. Yet, here was a homeless man giving him the last thing he owned. "Why would you give this to me?" James asked, his voice thick with disbelief. Ethan shrugged, offering a small, weary smile. "I don't have much, but I know what it's like to feel lost. Sometimes, even a small act of kindness can remind you that things can get better." James swallowed hard. In all his years of business, no one had ever offered him something so selflessly. He took the coin, his fingers shaking. "Thank you," he whispered, his mind racing. That night, James couldn't sleep. He kept turning the coin over in his hands, thinking about the man who had given him everything he had, despite having nothing himself. The billionaire realized that his wealth had made him blind to the struggles of those around him. The next morning, James made a decision that would change both their lives. He returned to the diner, hoping to find Ethan. When he spotted him still curled up in the doorway, shivering from the cold, James knelt beside him. "Come with me," he said. Ethan blinked up at him. "What?" "I want to help you." James took Ethan to a hotel, paid for a hot meal, and got him fresh clothes. But he didn't stop there. Over the next few weeks, he helped Ethan find a job in one of his companies, offering him training and mentorship. Months passed, and Ethan transformed. With each passing day, he regained his confidence, his strength. He worked hard, determined to prove himself. 1 year later, Ethan no longer lived on the streets. He had a small apartment, a steady job, and most importantly, hope. At a grand company event, James stood on stage, sharing his story. "A homeless man once gave me his last quarter," he told the audience. "That one act of kindness reminded me of what truly matters in life. Not money, not power, but the impact we have on each other." James then pulled the same quarter from his pocket. "This coin is worth more than all the billions I have." It reminded me that generosity isn't about how much you have, but how much you're willing to give. The crowd erupted into applause. Ethan, standing in the front row, wiped away a tear. And in that moment, he realized, sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can create the biggest,